All right, I have three things I want to do today. I'll try to keep it tight. The first one is thank you again so much for many fabulous comments. One of the people that is a regular follower as a subscriber on my channel said, hey, look, let's set up some dialogue. There are people that are making comments on your channel that are profound, and there are. And I try to follow many of them. I try to leave comments to many of them. But there is no question that there needs to be more of this. And I've had a couple people in the last few days that say, look, I have some insider information. I have something that you need to take a look at. I have something you might be interested in. And while I can't follow them all, I think that probably a couple times a month I can. And I can engage some of you who have deep and abiding intelligence studies about various subject matters. I mean, one of the things, I had somebody that posted in the last day or two, they haven't responded to me yet, but they have to, right? They've got to do this now. And they tell me that they are a Sumerian cuneiform translator and that they're actually able to read this. Fabulous to have that conversation, because I have had other people that posted say, well, how the hell do you know that what those Sumerian tablets mean and what gets lost in the translation? And I say to you, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, since that's only been up for 150 years, there is possibility of some adjustments. And some of those stories and guidelines, and Sitchin said this and so did Kramer, come with fragments. So you have a story, but that story is made up of pieces of 4 or 5 different fragments that have to be, the story itself has to be pieced together because you don't have a complete story on any one tablet. So yes, exactly, all of that's in play. And as a matter of fact, you know, I neither gave you all of the information that Sitchin shares, nor do I intend to, and part of it is I don't energetically, intuitively validate some of it, and without a second concurring source or multiple concurring sources, I just simply won't. So, and that's true both internally for me and also for what I might share. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, let me give you a little Q stuff. There are 2 new Q postings. The first one is very much in alignment with the kind of macro discussions that I try to have on this channel about what Q says, and it has to do with getting out of the weeds and seeing what is really going on. And what I would call this first posting, which is 1925, is this makes too light a comment about it, but it's semantics, right? One of the things, I'm going to move this just a little bit. One of the things that that we have talked about has to do with how we see ourselves and how we see the other side and how those interactions work and what kind of proposition, what kind of process they're going through. So let me get to the point. One of them has to do with fascism, and as I have pointed out, and this is how I see it, democracy or freedom or a republic form of government kind of sits on a teetery edge, and it can slip into a highly socialist communist phase and turn into authoritarian control, or it can slip across into the fascist side with mercantilism, oligarchs, and ultimate financial control and total control of the economy and everything else, which is equally as controlling and manipulating. So the balance of staying as a freedom-loving people with choices is always on the top of the ball. It's always on the top of the ball. And I've had interactions with people where they say, well, capitalism hasn't worked because of such and such. Well, you know, I can tell you in a word, capitalism is not going to work where the controller of your money is the Rothschild banking cartel, and that they and their minions in layers after layers in 168 countries in the EU and the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund and the Federal Reserve have control. There's no way that capitalism works. And not only that, by investing money and leveraging things, you get oligarchic situations where you've got 3 or 4 pharmaceutical companies, you've got 2 or 3 farm machine companies, you have chemical companies, you have retail supply companies, and they all consolidate into 2 or 3, and pretty soon they pay no attention to national interests, and they're as happy to make it in China or Bangladesh or Taiwan or Mexico as they are here, because they're not bound to us as a nation, and they don't market to us as a nation. They market to us as numbers. So define fascism, and then the question is forcible suppression of opposition, and of course that is. But that's also true, and we're seeing this now on the socialist side, where we're starting to say what is profoundly disappointing to me about the libertarian Democrats that I always trusted as a home base for free speech, free association, and the rest of that, where, you know, historically the ACLU, some of you are going to say they were always bad, but at least they came out and spoke up for minority people, minority groups that were trying to speak their piece. And that is being suppressed on both sides. It is clearly being suppressed on both sides. We now have the neoliberals. I won't call them liberals because there are liberals that I think are, you know, bring lots of good things to us. The neoliberals who want to quench and quiet any kind of dissension from their viewpoint, and they use they call you names, they use words, they treat you as racist and sexist and homophobic and all the rest of this stuff to shut you up, and they yell and shout down conservatives in universities and elsewhere. And now, of course, we have neoliberals, and I have to call them that, who tell people, shout these people out, run them out of restaurants, run them out of department stores. If you see them, heckle them and make them miserable until you get rid of them. And we have people like, what's her name, the California crazy woman who's the congresswoman, can't think of her name right now, Waters, that tells people to do that. So define censorship. The institution, let me get back here with it. The institution and as the system or practice of censoring. Well, you know, I just got done talking about it, and it's true on both sides. We have people in Europe now that are going to be imprisoned for making comments about immigrants or about Sharia law or about Arabic people that are disrupting to their way of life. We have this whole crazy and expanding anti-Semitic thing where we have non-Semitic people that are non-practicing religiously that are protected because nobody can talk about anything that they do or say. We are excluding them from the process. And the right of criticism, even if it's racist, sexist, phobic, and the rest of that, opens the spectrum of conversation. Do I like it? You know, no, but I can turn it off, shut it down, or counteract it. So I can't counteract anything and any kind of conversation if it in fact is illegal to do so. Define projection, and this is something that I have done, had big conversations with you. I mean, certainly as it relates to uranium one and the Russian thing and the rest of that, we've got all, Trump is supposedly the person that's engaged with Russia. Well, Robert Mueller was taking samples of uranium one to the Russians to see if it was going to be okay for them when they got uranium. We're importing most of our uranium now, and we don't have enough as it is, and yet we have insiders that are taking this over, and of course the Big Five and Hillary and the rest of them that did that. So they project it by saying, well, Trump's got, he might have a hotel in Moscow or something. Well, it's peanuts, even if it's true. You've got all of this sexual stuff where we're running around complaining about Trump might have been in a room somewhere where somebody peed on the bed, and yet we have sex trafficking. We've got the stuff in Haiti where the buddies of Clinton's were trying to abscond with 33 orphans across the Dominican Republic border. Which one of them is problematic? Just because I'm revolted by somebody peeing on the bed doesn't make it a federal crime. But I'll tell you what, sex trafficking and trafficking in minors does, and it offends me whether the rules allow for it or not. So that's projection. It says attribution of one's own ideas, feelings, or attitudes to other people or objects, especially the externalization of blame, guilt, or responsibility as a defense against anxiety. Well, they don't have any they don't have any anxiety. When you have narcissistic, psychopathic people, you don't have any danger of them feeling guilty. As a matter of fact, tests show that 3 or 4 or 5% of the population will pass a lie detector test even if they're blatantly guilty because they have no moral compass about it. Now, the discussions that we've had about red leather shoes and people making leather goods out of human skin, and I even hate to go there, but to have people that don't take any notice of that kind of depravity, that find no opposition to it. And now we have the Democrats, including a Supreme Court justice, that think that that the age of sexual consent ought to be down to 12 years. And then you've got the NAMBLA boys, the man-boy bunch, that thinks it ought to be much lower than that, and we ought to be teaching sexuality to kindergartners. It's crazy stuff. So who's projecting what? You've got the form of plan of scheming. Define psychological projection, and there we just, we've done it. Define narcissist. Well, narcissist is a shallower form, as many of you know, of either the psychopathic or sociopathic or disorders. And the narcissist may feel some minor form of guilt, whereas the psychopath doesn't feel any at all, has no sense of it at all, may figure out how to work around it, the psychopath better than the sociopath, to work around a social disorder because he or she knows, most likely he unfortunately, knows that if he gets caught, then there will be unpleasant consequences. But it's the consequences only that he cares about. He doesn't care about not being able to sleep at night. That is not of concern. And largely narcissists will do the same thing, and they may just rationalize that little bit of guilt. We probably have a Congress filled with, 5, 10, 15 psychopaths and or sociopaths, and 85% narcissists that have to project and have to move the rest of the stuff. They're controlled, right? So even if they carry some guilt, they have rationalized and justified getting away with it. So define aggression. Forceful and sometimes overly assertive pursuit of one's own aims and interests. Well, when you take Antifa and finance them, when you finance violent groups to meet on the streets, when you reward, as Maxine Waters does, overt hostility of people in public places, I think that defines aggression. What do you think about that? So, bonus round. Narcissists are renowned for using psychological projection to blame other people, and even when it is entirely apparent that they are the ones in the wrong. So we've got guys like Adam Schiff that keeps flipping. He never, ever answers a question. I don't know whether you've noticed that or not, but he never answers a question. He always flips it and makes somebody else out to be guilty. So there's no sense in trying to have a dialogue with him because there's never an answer to the question. So realism, and then it talks about the actions of Antifa, aggression, suppression, censorship, fake news, Twitter, Facebook, Google, YouTube, Reddit, etc. all using these projections and also not holding standards. I mean, there are two standards. One of the things that is profoundly apparent to most of us common citizens, and is painfully apparent to some of us who tried to prop up the legal profession, is how do you deal with a situation where your client says to you, well, I only did X and it's a tiny little thing. And I say, yeah, but the minimum penalty is 18 months and maybe we can get you pled out on a lesser included offense, and maybe we can get you down to time served and 6 months or something like that, or maybe suspended sentence for a couple of years and have you on probation. And he says, well, what about so-and-so that's been doing this for 10 years, that's a public figure and is doing it 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 times more than we are? Why is it that the poor guy that writes bad checks, non-violent bad check writer, ends up spending a couple years in prison, but the banksters that stole trillions of dollars from us, who got prosecuted in 2008? I ask you, they had corporations that pled guilty, they had banks, international banks that pled guilty, and they fined them, but not a single one of those guys went to jail. Madoff went to jail, but only because the corporation was Madoff. That's the only reason, is that they couldn't say, well, it's Madoff Corporation and they're 12 executives, and so we'll just charge them a fine. And of course, because it was a pyramid scheme, there was nothing behind it. It wasn't just a matter of stealing trillions, it was a matter that there wasn't any money that was going to go out to all the victims at all. So, we have this stuff that all falls in. And the next Q posting has to do with subversion, and again we're going into definitions. This is semantics. The state of being subverted, especially a systematic attempt to overthrow or undermine the government. Well, treason and subversion and sedition are a part of what's been going on, and some of us that are so radically offended by what's been going on lately, it has to do with the internal workings of official government, officialdom, that is actually working against us. I don't know how Strzok can say to a Senate committee, well, my personal opinions are nothing. Just because I hate Trump and I say we've got to get the effer doesn't mean that it impacted either my going after Hillary for the email scandal, for violating the classified documents and the rest of that. No, it didn't have anything to do with that, nor did it when we flipped and 2 days later I walked across the hall and we were going after Trump under the Steele dossier investigation stuff, and we did everything we could, and we've been doing it for 18 months trying to nail him for something that we have no direct claims that he did anything, but I can go from one side of the desk to the other and let one person off when naval officers spend time in prison for a single submarine photograph, but 22 violations of classified documents doesn't even get her a slap on the hands. And at the same time, we're going after people with fake documents and fake dossiers. So that is all seditious. It is a form of actively working to subvert the working form of our governmental system. So a couple things that they pointed out, we go back to December 21st in the executive order, December 21st of 17, where Trump said we can hold and block property of people who have either committed human trafficking, which is a big deal, and or who are doing illegal things, corporate things, private things, personal things, trusts, governmental entities that are engaging in bribery and the rest of that. And we're getting a reminder of that again today. It is something for us not to forget. And then there is the addition, and this is not brand new, but this has to do with the increasing courts-martial. Trump also extended his right to call. I'm getting off today's thing, but it fits into here. his right to call retired military and bring them back to active duty, which may well come into play. And then the Q guy goes through, whoever, whatever it is, the whole list of things that have actually happened. Some of us tend to forget about it. FBI personnel, DOJ, CIA, state personnel removal, White House personnel removal, House personnel removal, Senate personnel removal. You've got all these people that are retiring. What is it, 4 or 5 senators and about 30 or 40 House people. Unprecedented, absolutely unprecedented. And interestingly, a bunch of them are Republicans. And then you've got the whole CEO and vice president and chairman and executives of nonprofits and trusts and others that have resigned. The military budget, the military presence, the 45,000 sealed documents, which I'm really delighted that Q is bringing up, because sometimes we think it's forgotten, right? And then they go through the improvements made to Guantanamo, the reopening of private prisons and expanding of private prisons by Sessions, and the Turley Sessions comment about Huber and about being able to tuck in behind the Inspector General and have Huber use the 400 people that are in the employ of the Inspector General to go after people. So that's the Q stuff. All right, now let me give you piece number 3, because this eats on me, and some of you who have hung around since January know how this works with me. I have always been uncomfortable either that Trump and or Q. I mean, Q is just a shadow, right? That's all it is. People that start to say, well, go Q, go get him. Well, Q is just a reporter, okay? It is just a secret, and at best, it is a reporter. At the least, it is referencing things that are seen on the internet to remind us that there actually are things going on. Either way, it's good stuff. But I have been profoundly uncomfortable at times, sometimes more, sometimes less, that we are sitting here for 2 years. We are going to have sat here for 2 years by the midterm elections, and as a people, we have done nothing except watch, clap our hands, click the keys and the mice, and say, rah, rah, we're here. You know, we're all part of this. So I am once again asking you, who is proactive? Who in this audience is proactive about this? And what I would say to you is, I think it's time for us to make a commitment that if November 11th comes this year and there is no change, we will not sit. And there is some form of commitment that we make, and we call ourselves the awakened, we call ourselves Qers, we call ourselves skewers, I looked at a bunch of things like Patriot and Citizen and Revolutionary and Sustainer and Keystone and Scout and Soldier and Trooper and Combatant and Victor and Picket and Sentry and Hawk and Lookout and Vigil, and none of them resonated. Somebody is going to come up with a very short, cryptic name that we can say, yes, I am in. I am in. And if November 11th comes and we do not have fundamental changes, we will take action. We will march. We will protest. We will make our presence known. We will file lawsuits. We will be organized. And we will respond to the Antifas and the rest of them. Yes, we're going to approach this from a peaceful standpoint. There may be a time when it isn't. But in the meantime, we need to get off our duffs, and we need to say, you cannot do this anymore. And I think we say this not just to the neoliberals and the neocons and the rest of them, but we say it to Trump too, and we say that both as a carrot, hey, go with us, we're with you, we're right behind you, and as a stick, don't underdo it. Don't forget who you are. Don't forget who you represent. Don't forget who is expecting you to produce, and if you don't produce, we will. We will produce around you. We will make this work around you. we're either behind you, we're with you, we'll help you, we'll follow you. Trump and Republicans and Democrats on both sides that feel the liberty of this country and the need for liberty, but we will not be undone, and we will not sit idly by, and we will not sit here and watch things get worse. So I challenge you, first put it on here. If we can do it, I will build a website around it, and I will set us up to get more organized. But we must respond, and we must be aware, and we must be ready. And if the worst that we have to do is to set ourselves up for local November 11th parades, I will rejoice as much as anybody, and you'll see me with my little flag and walking down the highway with all the rest of you. But at the most, we cannot let another year pass. We cannot let it is paramount. Now, let me add to that as a piece, and I think it is an important piece, that not only means November 11th, but if they shake down the monetary system before then, we are on alert. If they shake down the electrical grid before then, we are on the alert. If they shut down the grocery distribution or fuel and gas, we are on the alert. Anything they do to disrupt this, we're on the alert. And if they pull our cash, as they did in India, if they pull the $100 or $50 bill, it is a triggering event. That's it. Because if you take that away from us, even if you don't use it regularly, you will have lost a freedom. And so we need to do this, I believe, and this is a call for you. Come forth. Let's do this. Let's get going. I've had problems in the past doing some of this because I don't know how to vet people. I have a lot better sense now who's following, who's subscribed, who's engaged, and what other channels might be helpful. And it is time for us not to sit on our duff, folks. Q cannot be the sole, and Trump, the sole source of our freedom. We cannot allow ourselves to do that as citizens, for ourselves or our posterity. We know now. We've been in this soup for many, many years, many generations, and we know now that the next generation is not going to get a shot at this like we do. It just won't happen. So with every year, it's going to get worse. I hate to be a doomsdayer, but it is time for us to be proactive. It's time for us to be active. It's time for us to follow through. And it is time for us to say we will not tolerate anymore. So here's a call out. And somebody's going to come up with this perfect term for us. One that cannot be bastardized, that cannot be minimized, and that is catchy, and that everybody wants to belong to. So come forth, hey? That's my call out. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a fabulous weekend. I have enjoyed every minute of it. Thank you so much.